In this video, I'm going to do a review of pretty much every different trap, dye, or treatment that I could find. I've got Full Metal Jacket, Dakota line, trap and snare dip, KBL, quick dye, Formula 1. I've got regular logwood dye and then speed dip. And now, I'm a pretty big fan of speed dip. I started out originally using logwood dye, dyeing and waxing traps. And that's, if you're just getting into trapping, you know, and you read particularly some older things, older articles or something like that, which is what I did. You know, a lot of people talk about dyeing trap or boiling traps. And typically what they're talking about is boiling them initially to get them clean. So to get any grease or anything like that off of them. Boil them just in Dawn or some kind of degreaser, especially if they're new traps, because they got grease on there. You want to get that grease off. And then you would boil them in that logwood dye. And that's this. It's just kind of a red powder. You can also get it black too. What I'm going to do, because like I said, I used to boil traps and with this logwood dye, and I just hated dealing with the heating them up and, you know, the fire or the fish cooker and heating it up and all that stuff. So what I'm going to try here is just mixing it up and dipping the traps in. So what we'll do is we'll dip them in, pull them out, see what they look like initially, and then I think to get any kind of good coating they may have to soak for a little while. So I'm going to keep that open. All the other ones should be able to just dip and hang. And I've got a combination of some old traps that have some dye on them that have been dyed, have been coated, and they're from last year. I just power washed them off. So, you know, I got some traps like this that should have no problem taking. And then I've also got some brand new traps that I just got a real light coat of rust on. So we're going to kind of dip both of them, try it and see, and kind of get a feel for which one of these I prefer. And I'll try to tell you objectively what I think about the different ones and what I may use going forward. So anyway, hope this is helpful, and we'll see what we get. Alright, so initially the first dip I'm going to go with is Full Metal Jacket. This is made by the Predator Control Group, Clint Locklear, and I've heard some good things about it. Of course, Clint talks really highly of it, and some of the ads for the different on different trapping websites and supply websites say that you know, Clint saw when he was testing it a dramatic increase in catches of these traps dipped in Full Metal Jacket versus traditional dye. So I've just got these plastic containers here I picked up from Walmart to try to do. You know, I'm just going to do a small amount. I'm going to use the full, so this is a gallon. It says this dip is ready to go. Doesn't have to be mixed with anything. It says it dries clear and odorless after 24 hours. Protects, it seals in rust and metal odor, and can be used on new dyed or undyed traps and snares. Ideally, dip it in temps above 60 degrees, which we're running about 80 today. A lot of these say to dip them in low humidity. That's not something we get very often here in the southeast. I think we're running right around 68% humidity or something like that. You can see me sweating, so this is pretty standard for us down here. So that's kind of an important thing. I need something that'll work even with a little humidity. So I'm just going to pour this right out into my container here, and we'll see how it does. Alright, so there it is, the full gallon. Doesn't need any mixing or anything else. It does say dip twice the first time. Traps dip twice the first time. I'm assuming that's meaning like clean, undyed traps, brand new traps. So I've got one of those, and I've got them already rigged up. I got my tags on them. My stakes, I use disposable pogo anchors. So got me a little piece of wire here so that I can dip everything down in there. And I'm also going to put, so that's my brand new trap with a light coating of rust on it. Also got this older trap. I've got a bunch of dirt on it. I'll rinse it off and do something else. I've got this older trap. It's been dyed. So I'll see what these look like after 24 hours. May try to re-dip this new trap per the instructions. We'll see what they look like. But that's one I like to go ahead and, at least on my first go round, attach my stakes and everything so that I can dip everything, and I don't have to have any concern about about any contamination. It's kind of a big container. I'm gonna have to flip my traps here, but that should have them. That should have them coated. That's all it says, dipping. Dipping, you're done. So I'm gonna dip these, pull them out, hang them up, and we'll check on them in tomorrow. Next up is the Dakota line trap and snare dip. This is black. It's a non-petroleum, so it's mixed with water. It says right here on the bottle, mix 1.5 parts water to 1 part dip. Most effective when applied at moderate temperatures and low humidity. Like I say, not necessarily the low humidity. I'd say it's a moderate temperature, at least for Georgia. So I'm gonna pop this open. We cap off. Kind of looks like a latex paint or something on that top. Well, exactly what it looks like when you pour it in there. It looks like a paint. Mix thoroughly before use. So mix 1.5 parts of water to 1 part dip. So I'm going to just fill this up. One. We'll eyeball a half. That looks pretty good. Swirl it around a little bit. Alright, now it's definitely not mixed up good yet. See if we can't do this without making a huge mess. See how well this box seals. Just give it a good shaking. That should be pretty darn good. So now I'm going to take, again I got my new trap and my old trap. Both of these, my preferred method of cleaning is pressure washing. Both of these have been pressure washed. Put them in here. I might flip them over there. I think I'll try sloshing them around just a little bit. Make sure they get good and coated. Looks pretty good. We'll go hang these up. Let them drip off. Now definitely you can see it. You can see the coating on them there. Now we'll transition to the KBL, Katz Brothers. This is mixed 3 parts of unleaded gasoline with 1 part of KBL quick dye. It says use white gas, Coleman lantern fuel for best results. If using gasoline, use a higher octane. And evidently you can use mineral spirits too. When using mineral spirits, mix 2 parts to 1 part KBL quick dye. Stir mixture well before dipping traps. So that's what I actually got, some mineral spirits. just to try something different. So we'll see how she's going to turn out. And I know that's one, you know, a lot of people's hang up. This, which I've never used this before, but I've used a speed dip, and you know, that's a gasoline based or a Coleman fuel based dip, which is kind of counterintuitive. A lot of people think, well, golly, you want your traps to be clean and odorless, and you dipping them in gasoline doesn't make a lot of sense. But that scent does dissipate. Now, the one thing to take into consideration is it takes it a little while to dissipate. You know, you can't just dip your traps, hang them up, and go set them the next day. So that's one reason. One thing I like about if the logwood dye will work cold, I like that idea. And then so you can tell that's definitely, it doesn't really look like a latex base. This is brown color. It looks almost like a stain, kind of like a lacquer or something. So it says mix 2 parts of mineral spirits. So we're going to try this mineral spirits. One reason I kicked around trying the mineral spirits instead of the others is it says odorless. So I don't know, this is all about experimenting, seeing what'll happen. Like I said, a lot of the gasoline turns a lot of people off, and raises a lot of questions. It does work, but I figure it's worth trying some of these other ones and really seeing. Obviously, if all these are on the market, there's people using them. So I will say, from talking to people, some comments on Instagram, there's a lot of folks that seem pretty high on the Full Metal Jacket. So I'm pretty anxious to see that, especially if it is pretty seriously a one dip deal. 24 hours later, you're ready to go. So it says odorless, but it smells just like acetone or mineral spirits. So about what I would have expected. Alright, put the lid back on that. And the purpose of dyeing your traps is a couple-fold. I mean, one, it's not as much the color that you're worried about. You're not necessarily trying to remove the shininess or dull the shininess. To an extent you are, because there is occasions when you know, you might get rain or something that washes some of your dirt away and exposes your trap, and if it's dull, a brown, black color, then it'll you know, should stand out less. But you know, the 2 big reasons are to protect your trap from rust. Rust causes odor, and you know, it reduces the life of your trap, and then to neutralize the odor and kind of neutralize the trap and smell, so that you don't have a foreign odor that there's nothing to smell, nothing for the animal to smell. You know, I'm talking primarily dry land traps. We're talking predator traps. I'm dyeing MB550, so you know, water traps, that's a whole different scenario, and smell and scent is not so much of a concern, but definitely durability is. So you know, this will also give us a little bit of an idea so far as durability wise, you know, for just an all-around dip or dye, because that's what I like. You know, whatever I'm using, I want to be able to treat all my traps, water traps, land traps, everything. So let me grab a fresh trap over here. Got my fresh trap, and I got my old trap. Try to put them in there, base down. Say, this is definitely kind of more of a stain or something than the Dakota line was. Definitely had more of a latex or kind of a paint base. We'll swirl these around a little bit. Got them mostly coated. Top jaw. New try. There we go. That'll get them. Pull them out and drain them. Got a pretty thick coat on these too. We'll hang these up. Alright, next up we got the Formula 1. This is Nuke Sterling's product, and it's a water base as well. So I did mess around and get white, not thinking. I was thinking about coon traps and dog proof traps, because I'm going to be testing some different dog proof traps, so I'll dip some of those and instead of some predator traps, or some foothold traps anyway. So this is a water base. It is 2 parts water to 1 part Formula 1. So I'm just going to do it again here, right in the container. Again, kind of paint looking. Says it dries hard in 2 hours, ready to use in 24. So it does say, particularly with the white, if you've got heavy rust, the rust will bleed through. And I'm sure with I got an old dyed black dog proof, I'm sure the black's gonna bleed through. We'll see how it does on the white one too. Of course, it does say, or the new one, it does say that 2 to 3 treatments for initial treatments for a new trap, which is one thing I'm not super crazy about. I like to dip traps and be done with them, so we'll see. I don't want to have to keep doing the same work over and over. I like once one and done. We got her all mixed up, looking like a bath full of milk. We got an old Duke dog proof. We'll throw a Bridger in there as well. New Bridger. See how she performs. It'll be a little bit easier because they're lower profile. Got a fair coating, but you can see that the color bleeding through where you would definitely need to retreat, especially on an initial one. So we'll see how that goes, see how they dry. Next up, we've got the plain old logwood trap dye. There's really no spectacular directions. It says 1 package will dye 1 to 2 dozen large traps, 2 to 3 dozen smaller traps. Boil new traps in a strong household degreaser or lye solution to remove oil. Rinse thoroughly, let traps simmer in hot water just below boiling point for approximately 1 hour. That's what I ain't keen on, is the boiling point, 1 hour. So I don't think that this is going to work very well as an initial one-time dip. But I think there may be some potential if we leave it 24 hours in the dip, then pull it out and hang it. So that's what we're going to try here. See if I can do 2 things at once. Like I say, there's no great instructions on this. You just kind of mix it in some water, and this is less water than typically I would mix it in. If I was boiling it, I'd mix it in a big pot. But it's kind of like Kool-Aid or something, just a real fine powder. And usually, even though this is kind of a red or brown color, if you were to put this in a pot and heat it up and let it boil or let it get real warm, it's gonna get real dark and black looking. This not so much yet, but we're gonna give it a whirl. And I'm just running. I like to put this wire through the swivel. Like I say, for one, that kind of lets my steaks and everything get down in there. But then two, I just try to do one, maybe two wraps, so that I can real quickly and easily undo the wire while I'm dropping them in my trap bucket. And you can see just an initial dip. It's not really doing anything. I mean, you can only really tell it on the new trap, but it's not really doing anything. So that's why I say I want to leave this in here. We're going to leave it for 24 hours. We'll check on it tomorrow and see. To get it kind of over on its side. What I'll do is fill some more water so that they're completely covered. Then I'll just put the lid on, swirl it a little bit, and I'll put it over here with the rest of them. So the last option is speed dip, and it is a gasoline-based mix. So you mix a quart of the dip to a gallon of gasoline, unleaded gasoline. So I've heard of people having an issue with the traps being tacky after they're dyed or dipped, and I don't know. I think that could possibly be an issue with the gasoline. That's why I like to use the non-ethanol gas, or it could have to do with the humidity. It could be with the mixture being mixed a little bit light. So maybe I try to tend to err on the side of using a little bit more than a gallon of gasoline just to make sure that everything's mixed good. So, but for this, we'll put our dip in, a quart of dip. And this size box actually works pretty darn well because you can fit a 330 in there. Usually, unless you got a lot of dip in there, you're gonna have to flip it over, and you can only get about half of it. But I usually try to rinse out my can, get everything I can out of there, and then mix the remaining gallon in. And a gallon of dip gives you a pretty good bit. So, especially for doing just footholds that are kind of small anyway, kind of short. Like I say, once you start doing conibears and stuff, and it adds up a little bit, you need a little bit more. But a quart and a gallon does pretty well. Just gonna kind of shake it around a little bit. You gotta be careful because it's not completely sealed, obviously, as it slushes out. But shake it around a little bit, and then put my two traps in there. I like to kind of stir them around a little bit. Especially if it's an older mixture. And then I'll just pull them out, let them drip for a minute, hang them up, and you can see they got not a super heavy coat, but especially that brand new trap has got a coat on it. So that's what we're looking for, is a coat, not necessarily heavy or light, but just a good coat protected from the elements. So we'll let that hang up and dry and see how long it takes for that scent to dissipate. So here we've had our traps hanging for, it's actually been 48 hours. It rained yesterday, so I didn't get a chance to mess with them yesterday, but I kept them covered here. And then I've got the traps that were just in the cold logwood now. I'm gonna pull those out, and then I'll walk you through looking at each one. Just looking overall, you look at the Full Metal Jacket traps, and they don't look like there's anything on them, which is not necessarily a bad thing as long as there is something on them. This Dakota line, it's got kind of a white coat on it. You can tell that there's definitely something on there. It's a pretty good coat. There's a little bit of rust that I think may be bleeding through, but I think most of these said if first time application you need to apply twice anyway. So next we got this KBL. It looks pretty good, really and truly. It looks real similar to the Speed Dip, which is a gasoline base, so that makes sense. You can smell that a little bit, kind of got almost a little bit of paint smell to that the Dakota line. KBL, it's got a little bit of a smell to it. I'm not sure what that is. Then we got the white Formula 1. These traps would definitely need a second dip. You've got the black one that the color's bleeding through a pretty good bit. You got rust coming through on this other one, so definitely need a second dip on these. And then the Speed Dip, it's they're about what I expected. They're both coated pretty good. Still got a little bit of a hint of smell to them, a little bit of that gasoline smell. But let's pull these logwoods. And like I say, these have been in here for been in for 48 hours. We'll hang them up. And just initially looking at them, like I say, they need to dry. That one that was already dyed, I mean, it's dark. It's got a good color on it. The brand new trap, it's got a little bit of a light coating on it. You can definitely tell it doesn't have much rust. I think where the rust is, it probably took really good. Where there's not so much rust, it's going to be light colored. But we'll see what it looks like when it dries. But overall, I'm pretty satisfied with, even that, just a cold dip. So let me walk you through and show you what all these look like up close. So going through here first, we got the Full Metal Jacket. Like I said, you look at them and you can see the rust plainly through there. It doesn't really look like there's anything on it. So it'll definitely be interesting to see what how that turns out as far as scent wise and otherwise. This is the Dakota line, and you can see it's got kind of a haze to it. You got a little bit of rust bleed through, but overall, satisfactory initial. This KBL looks very much like the Speed Dip. This is the new trap here, the fresh trap, and it's got a pretty a nice dark tint to it. These are the traps that I just pulled out of the logwood. I'll let them dry and update you on that. But overall, like I say, these traps look pretty. This is the brand new trap here with just a little bit of rust. And like I said, I think anywhere where there's rust on it, it's going to take really well. So 48 hours just soaking in cold dip or dye. Then the Formula 1, you can see you definitely need another coat on there. You got the black, and then the brand new trap with a little bit of rust. You see that rust bleeding through. Definitely need another coat on there. And then the Speed Dip, and this is what I use. This is kind of my go-to. And let's see, this is the brand new trap on the right, and this is the older dyed trap on the left. And I mean, you could tell they both got a good dark coating on them. So it'll take the season really of trying these out. I want to dip. I've got a bunch of dog-proof traps that I'm gonna maybe do a little bit more experimenting and see. But it's gonna take some setting and some wear to really figure out how it all shakes out. Just looking and thinking about cost in particular, because that's the first thing that really jumped out at me with the Full Metal Jacket. It's $25 for a gallon. I was thinking, holy smokes, that's pretty steep. But when you think about some of these others, they cost 11 or 12 bucks for a quart, which the water-based one, so the Dakota line, water-based, the Formula One water-based, I think they're right around that $10 to $12, and you just mix them with water, so there's no additional cost. So that, realistically, if you're looking for cheap, that's a fairly more cheap or economical option, you might say. The KBL and the speed dip, you know, you're going to mix those with either gasoline or mineral spirits. I mix the KBL with mineral spirits. So there you're looking at additional costs. So you got the 12 bucks or so in the quart, and then you got for a gallon of unleaded gas, the non-ethanol, 3 bucks or $3.50, something like that. So a little more cost. You're still under the $20 range as opposed to the Full Metal Jacket. And really and truly, if you're going for absolute cheapness, the logwood dye is the way to go. I mean, it's 4 bucks, 5 bucks for a bag, a small bag, and that'll treat a bunch of traps. And like I say, the big inconvenience for me for that has always been you gotta heat it, you gotta heat the water up, and you gotta, you know, it's an extra step, takes a little extra time. But with this, and this is so easy, you don't have to worry about, you know, one thing I've run into with speed dip is I always try to find some way to store it. Well, invariably, I get water in there, and I either have to dump the mix out or have to make a whole new mix. So that's always kind of an issue for me with, you know, the speed dip. And so storage, I mean, with the logwood dye, if you just keep a 5-gallon bucket of it mixed up and drop your traps in, leave them a couple days, pull them out, you know, I don't think it's going to take as long for the scent to dissipate. Realistically, I think you can take those, dip them, leave them in for 2 days, hang them up, let them set for 2 days, and go set them. So anyway, that's kind of my initial run through and evaluation. The ones, the Formula One, I wish that I got a different color besides white, but still, you know, seeing that's going to be a hang up for me on some of these the double dipping is not something I'm into. I'm looking for a one and done. So I'm excited about the Full Metal Jacket. I'm going to do some more canine predator traps in the Full Metal Jacket, and I think realistically what I think I may wind up doing for after I use traps, have some catches, and I'm ready to re-dye them or re-dip them, give them a good pressure washing, and keep me a batch of logwood dye just going around through the year, and that way I can, when I get them clean, I can drop some in, hang them up, and just keep rotating out to use traps like that to keep them going and not have to go through a big rigmarole of dipping and having to wait multiple weeks before I set them, as I have done in the past with the speed dip. So anyway, I'll keep you posted on, you know, how this turns out, how these actually wear out in the field and hold up to trap line abuse and hopefully some catches.